Now, everyone in China basically knows what this movie is about. Not only is the movie huge here, but it's about a pretty famous point in their history. In the West, though, the Korean War is known as the Forgotten War. It being situated between World War II and the Vietnam War, it is often overlooked in history. Like, so I'm going to have to go over a bit of the history before we even get into that. Hopefully, people in China who do know the history of this a bit better like the other perspective on it, because well, you're learning a bit of a Western perspective, even though I'm definitely not an expert. Like I got most of my knowledge of this looking stuff up on the internet, so don't look to me as like a foremost expert or anything. I know very little about it overall, but I can give the basic points. So even before the war, though, you have to look at the situation in Korea. Why did this war come about? Like, why is there North and South Korea? Well, Imperial Japan basically swallowed the Empire of Korea in 1910. So you're looking at 30 some years before when Imperial Japan fell at the end of World War II, no Korea. So there was nothing to give back. Like, we have to really figure that out. Like, this is where America and the Soviet Union came in. Because, again, there's no Korea left. You have these two big powers dividing it up, mostly because they didn't want the other one to have control of this area. They wanted kind of a buffer to keep them both safe. They both set up governments of their choice to rule over North and South Korea. And this is where things went really different between the two Koreas. The Soviet Union helped North Korea rebuild a lot, making them a pretty decent power in the area at that time. America basically gave South Korea the bare minimum. So South Korea was basically falling apart with no backing and a really corrupt government. And if this sounds similar to mistakes in Afghanistan, Haiti, or a dozen other places, I'm sure it's just coincidence. Now, you have the two Koreas at this time were culturally very similar, the North being the better place to be. The South was under the authoritarian rule of Syngman Rhee, who was handpicked by America, and this guy becomes important later. He comes up a lot. Like, he was not a good person. We'll get that right out. In fact, a lot of people hated him. So when the Korean War is mentioned in China, is generally that they were only fighting the U.S. This is kind of right and wrong in a way. Technically, it was an intervention forced by the UN, acting for the United States, really. But it wasn't just America. There's lots of countries involved. You have Canada, Australia, England, and many more. Especially early on, though, you were really looking at America controlling things and trying to push American interests. So, while protecting the people of South Korea almost as an afterthought. The first goal really was to stop the spread of communism as part of the Cold War. The second goal was to keep that jerk Syngman Rhee in power. Oh, and yeah, if you have time, keep the people safe, really. Like, when the war started, America was really reluctant to get involved even. The reason they did actually was the Chinese Revolution in 1949. This made them scared of the spread of communism going further and further, and them losing world power, really. Before this, they were mostly focused on Europe. They really ignored the rest of the world. The Korean War is the conflict that took the whole Cold War global, in a way. And speaking of China's revolution, North Korea helped out the People's Liberation Army during that war too, so there was kind of a debt China owed to North Korea at this time. And it was, and even going further, back to the Chinese Revolution, and if that hadn't happened, there's no way this would have been a UN mission. UN missions need to be approved by the Security Council. These days, that's mainly made up of USA, Russia, China, the UK, and France. But after the Chinese Revolution, America, the UK, and France did not change over the seat of power in the council to the actual Chinese government. So the Soviet Union at the time, Russia now, was boycotting the council. So when they're having this vote to go into North Korea, there was no one to say no, and that's why it became a UN mission to save South Korea and push further American interests, really.